let me bring on Houston Burnett from Shaking the Southland. Houston, thanks for being here.
Yeah, man. Glad to finally be back.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. I know you were out of town, finally got back, and jumped right on here with me. So appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, man. I've been at a roofing conference in Orlando for the entire week. And yeah, it is crazy. It's actually, it's not as crazy as it sounds. It's crazier than you would think. So I had a lot of fun down there, and I'm just glad to be back. Glad to get back just in time to watch football yesterday. And it's been a fun season this far.
Yeah, you might say you were feeling on top of the world in Orlando.
Yeah, it was all under one roof.
All right, that's pretty good. All right, well, let's jump in. I want to talk about this Louisville game. We'll preview that, and we can talk some basketball later. So Louisville's kind of maybe it's the most normal team. Maybe they're a little weird. I can't quite decide, but they're 5-3, 3-2 in the ACC, and they basically won every game you'd expect. They beat Austin Peay, should have beat them. Beat Jacksonville State, Georgia Tech at home. No surprises there. They go on the road, maybe a little closer than it should have been, but they take care of business against UVA and BC in close wins. So no great, you could say the same about Clemson. They played 3 teams that are currently ranked. They lost at Notre Dame, close game. If they don't commit 3 turnovers, they probably win. Close game at home to SMU, and a close game at home to Miami, where they gave up a fumble, scoop and score, back and forth game. They score 45 points, still lose. So, just like Clemson, they've beaten every bad team they've faced, and they've lost to every ranked team they've faced, but they've faced 3 ranked teams. So it's a much different record. Let's start high level. Your first thoughts or overall kind of impressions of Louisville so far.
They're Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I know that, it's easy to say, hey, they're the most normal. It's correct. They found a way to win against inferior competition. But if you kind of delve into the metadata a little bit, you look at, they had to come back from 20 down against Boston College. You look at the Georgia Tech game. Georgia Tech had a blocked field goal run back for a touchdown, and also couldn't convert from the one. There are 2 touchdowns there that they gave up. That's a different result when you go back and look at those highlights of that game. And Georgia Tech outgained them by over 100 yards in that game. Virginia, I watched a lot of that game. It was just kind of back and forth, and Virginia couldn't punch it in. I want to say Virginia had a goal line stand. They couldn't score on Louisville. So Louisville has been able to kind of survive and advance against inferior competition, but it's going to be a step up. You could easily make the case that some of the turnovers were so, hokey pokey against both Miami and Notre Dame that they could have won those games. But at the same time, the biggest high-level thing that you look at if you're at Clemson and you're going to try to expose is their secondary is a major problem. They've given up a ton of yards and they've given up a ton of points. So if you're Garrett Riley, you're dialing up everything you can to get Wesco, Moore, and Williams out in space.
Yeah, I agree with you. Their run defense, I was looking at it, and the run defense is fine, but the pass defense is very iffy. And that sort of leads me to a question I wanted to ask about Kade Klubnik. I didn't do a recap. I was out of town, as I mentioned, after the Virginia game. So let's talk about it now. I thought Kade really struggled. The interception he threw was probably, I want to say probably the worst interception I've ever seen him throw. I mean, quadruple, not triple, quadruple coverage, like in a little diamond around him, threw it directly to the guy. I was watching screaming, no one's open. And he threw it directly to the defender. There were several throws that were just severely missed, including, I think it was Burning Stool, but a receiver in the end zone, completely open, overthrew him by 4 feet out the back of the end zone. He settled down. He went over 300 yards. He got the job done. You do that against, Georgia, you get blown out. You do it against Pittsburgh, you might lose. If you do that against Louisville, do you lose?
Here's the thing about that. I mean, I think we have a natural assumption as Clemson fans to be like, he's going to keep doing this as a quarterback. He could. I'm not ruling that out. But also, it's like, all right, well, we've seen with the best, Trevor and Deshaun, them having games that were not. And so I mean, even games that they might have lost. Think about Deshaun. Deshaun did not play, I guess, up to his snuff standard against Pittsburgh in 2016, and he still broke the single game record for passing in ACC history. But he threw 3 crucial interceptions. I would argue that his interception against Pitt is the worst interception I've ever seen ever.
The one in the end zone?
In the end zone. That was egregious. That was such a terrible pass. And so you can't always just assume that's going to happen. But at the same time, you're correct. He was off. He was a little excited. But I feel like for Clemson fans, it's kind of I'd rather be talking about, well, he was kind of off this game a little bit than the opposite of the last 3 years, where it's like we as fans cannot see a downfield pass ever in the last 3 years. This is like, all right, we just gotta see him, zip it in there, get a little bit more. And I think the bye week has come at a very good time. I think the best thing that's happened to this team is them getting dropped down to 11th in the polls. You're coming against 3 teams in the ACC coming up that could be problems, they could be scary, but they also have some pretty glaring weaknesses that you could expose, and it could be really problematic for them early on in the game if you're able to expose them. So I think that's the first thing that you need to do is you need to get on top of Louisville first and expose that secondary, keep things clean. Because like you said, if you keep a clean game and they turn the ball over, as in Louisville, this could be a really, really daunting task for Louisville if they cannot play a clean game.
Yeah, and so you mentioned Clemson drops in the AP poll, which is interesting. So just going to quickly go over that. It's Oregon, Georgia, Penn State, Ohio State, Miami, Texas is the top 6. Certainly that seems fine to me. Then it gets more interesting as it goes. Tennessee 7, that's a 1-loss Tennessee, a 1-loss Notre Dame at 8, undefeated BYU at 9, who jumps Clemson, and a 1-loss Texas A&M, who jumps 4 spots to get in that 10 spot above Clemson. I don't know. I mean, Clemson could be 8, 9, 10, 11, but I think what stands out to me is, right after Clemson, it feels like, the teams below Clemson are a tier different. You have Iowa State, Indiana, both undefeated. You have 2-loss Alabama. You have Boise State. You have 2-loss LSU. So it feels like Clemson's kind of like on that on the dividing point, right? So to me, which side of that dividing point they're on is how good is Klubnik. When he plays like he did against NC State, Clemson could beat a lot of those teams in the top 10. If he plays, like he did some of the worst stretches of the Virginia game, there may be more like in Indiana. So I'm really fascinated to see, can he just dominate what is not a very good pass defense? And then this is the first, which is so weird. There's only 3 common opponents on the schedule between Clemson and Miami, and this is the first one we get to see. Well, sorry, second one, Florida State, but Florida State, so bad, almost not helpful. But this is like the good one, right? The other one being Wake Forest. This is the good one. They put up 45 in a loss to Miami. Can Clemson do something like that? And it's interesting because I think Clemson will. I think Clemson will put up points. But I want your thoughts on this. Louisville, they ranked 15th in total offense nationally. Tyler Shough, he has played one more game. He has 512 more passing yards than Kade Klubnik. Again, an extra game, but still, that's to even be a little ahead of him is pretty impressive. I think this offense is pretty dangerous. Am I right on that?
They're a good offense. That's not discount. I mean, they have some very talented wide receivers. They have 2 really good backs in Chaney and Brown. Brown's the freshman. I think Brown could end up being likely he's on track to be freshman of the year, rookie of the year in the ACC. Just not to slight Wesco or more. I just think that Brown's got more touches. He's a little bit more visible as a freshman. He could end up being your freshman rookie of the year in the ACC. But with that being said, you look at how Notre Dame got after him. You look at other teams like even Virginia and Georgia Tech were able to create pressure problems for them. The thing about Miami, I know, and this is not on their offense. Cam Ward, you're not going to get me to say anything bad about Cam Ward. He's every bit as good. Miami's defense is not good. It's just straight up, it's bad. Yeah. And Louisville was able to expose that. 45 points. There was no cheapness to that. They scored all 45 on Miami, going right down the field on them, no issue. So I think that's more of an indictment on Miami's defense necessarily than Louisville has a very good offense, but 45 on a top 5 team, that's a problem to me. When you look at Notre Dame, who was able to hold them to 24 points, but also turn them over, I want to say 3 or 4 times in that game. Turnovers against SMU. SMU was able to move the ball up and down the field on them, but also stop them. And I don't think SMU has the talent like Miami does. If you look pound for pound, SMU was able to stop them more than Miami was. So I think out of all 3 of those defenses, SMU, Miami, and Clemson, I think Clemson's the most talented, the most disciplined, and has the most potential to stop them the most in this. So that's why I think they are dangerous. But also, if you think that you're going to just get a repeat performance like Miami, I would caution any Louisville or any person that believes that 45 is just going to be the norm against a team like Clemson.
Yeah, I would not predict Louisville to go score 45, but I do think it's a test against a Clemson defense, which probably the best in the ACC, but maybe even despite that, still not up to the usual Clemson standards. And I would, I'll preface that with I think it's the backups. I think the starting 11 are very good, and the backups need that time to grow, and which is, you need to play them because they're not good. So then you're going to give up points. It's sort of an ironic thing, but that's going to be tested. Is it really just the backups? We're going to find out, because I think this is the best offense. I think it's fairly obvious this is the best offense Clemson has faced since Georgia. You can even argue more so than Georgia, but that's probably a scheduling thing. So this is the second best offense they faced. The last time they faced an offense like this, they gave up 30 plus points and lost. So let's see. I think this is a big test. Anything else you want to hit on this before we wrap?
I think it's just a matter of, I would be interested to see kind of the pacing of the first half in this game. I think the common theme that you've seen since the Georgia game, or really even the Georgia game, if you really think about it, is Clemson has played great first halves every game this year, at least defensively. Offensively, since the Georgia game, they've come out and they have smoked everybody that they've played, or at least put up big numbers. And if that continues, when you put Louisville in a hole, I seriously doubt that a 20-point lead would evaporate against the Clemson defense. When you put something like that on film where you're consistently coming from behind, if Clemson's able to replicate that, then I think it could be a good Saturday for Clemson.
Yeah, so two last things I want to mention. You talked about Isaac Brown, the freshman running back. His stats are awfully similar to Phil Maffa's, which is really, really impressive for a freshman. And he's done it on fewer carries. So Maffa, 682 yards rushing, and Brown, 649. They both have 6 touchdowns, but Brown's actually averaging more yards per carry. So really impressive for a freshman. And then just my final thought on this, I think Clemson wins. I don't know if they're going to – I think Clemson could score 45, but I don't know if they're going to give up 35 or if it's going to be like a 21, 20, 17 type game. So that's what I'm most interested in. Will this defense prove itself? Much like Louisville, Clemson's faced one playoff team. They lost. They played 6 teams that are probably, hoping to even just make a bowl, and they beat bad teams badly, which is all you can do. Well, now they got like kind of that upper middle class team. This is a solid opponent, but they're certainly not a playoff team. If Clemson is who we think they are, we think they're a top 10 team, I think Clemson takes care of them more like 45-17 than 45-35. So that's what I'm looking to see. And I think that'll be this will be honestly Clemson's most interesting game since the opener.
I agree 100%.
Well, Houston, thanks for joining for this. Let's hit the music, and then we'll hit our next topic.